And if you look at the sea level rise kind of figures, the estimates that scientists have put out, you see that there's still significant levels of uncertainty there, but between 20% to 1/3 of the country could go underwater. And we're a country that has over 160 million people. So, so just in terms of that reality, that cannot be contradicted. Like, that is the reality that we live in. Now, you talked about technology, and I do think that that technological shift is happening, where now countries like Bangladesh, countries that still have challenges to do with energy access, they can actually leapfrog these previous technologies of the previous century and actually go on to new technologies like renewable energy, solar, wind, and so on, and really address this challenge head on. Because when you're making investment decisions about these coal power plants and so on, you're essentially making decisions for the next 50 years. These are infrastructural decisions. So, you know, and right now, all over the world, coal power plants are being shut off. So what does that tell us about whether this is a good decision or not?
So the technology now exists to enable countries to realize you don't have to necessarily trade it off. No one's saying live without electricity, just have electricity of a slightly different type, not coal-fired, but renewable. Use solar instead of something else, have electric vehicles instead of, you know, the internal combustion engine. That's an interesting point. Obviously, I just want to come to the extreme weather events to some extent, because when we're talking about the trade-offs and where we are, how do you look at that? Because for insurance companies, this must be increasingly becoming a nightmare. As you have more and more extreme weather events, look at all that's happened in the United States alone in the last some years. And unkind people were saying it's karma to some extent, which is really unkind. But even here at Davos, it's the worst snowfall that you've seen in a long period of time. Is this something you're factoring into all your calculations, that climate change is starting to have its impact in extreme weather events, and it's going to really affect the insurance companies as much as anyone else?
No, you're absolutely right. Today, it's already a reality that this is impacting, and it makes our pricing more and more difficult. But today, it's still insurable. I think if you go much further to 2020, 2030, we can clearly say that a scenario between 3 and 4 degrees is not insurable anymore. Your basement shop in New York, your basement shop in Mumbai will at this point not be insurable anymore. And this is something we need to figure in. And to my mind, we have done a lot, but the glass is only half full and not half empty, but only half full. We really need to go further. And to my mind, it really needs both sides. It needs the governments to really take a very proactive attitude when it comes to investing into new technologies. So as an insurer, for example, I am looking at things in a long-term perspective, 20, 30 years. But today I don't have enough incentives from a regulatory perspective to really go into infrastructure. I would love to do more. At the same time, I do believe that businesses need to see it, as you said earlier, as a business opportunity. And in my case, it's pretty simple. I have a good return potentially from investing into coal. I have lots of claims of having all these consequences. If you make this equation, you will end up with a negative result. So for us, it was very clear, and I used it as a business opportunity. Having a little bit less on the investment pays out significantly on having less claim and being able to provide insurance still. And I would really like this to penetrate into other business areas. And when we put out the first chunk of green investments of 3 billion, we calculated this over 6 years because we thought nobody would take it. It was gone within 2 years. So the demand is there.
Vikram, I would like to commend Thomas and AXA from divesting all of their coal investments. That's genuine leadership in the business community. Thank you. You had previously divested from oil sands. Significantly, the largest sovereign national wealth fund in the world, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, whose income came entirely from oil and gas in the North Sea, has just announced that it is 100% divesting from all oil and gas assets. Why? Thomas gave us one of the reasons. But these carbon assets are now becoming stranded. You remember the subprime mortgage crisis. So many millions of mortgages that were actually worthless, but people didn't realize it quickly enough. And it caused the Great Recession. Now we have a subprime carbon bubble. 2/3 of the existing carbon reserves cannot be burned, but yet they're marked to market on the books of sovereigns and multinationals. At what point will they realize they're actually worthless? I don't know when that realization will occur, but it will, and it will occur within the time span relevant to long-term investors. But if I may say one more thing, Anand is one of the co-sponsors of the crucially important California Summit meeting in September. I would like to challenge you gently, Anand. You have done so much. Can you lead the way with business at that California Summit by announcing some higher aspiration and commitment?
I have to tell you, Vikram, in a sense, Vice President and I have set you up a little bit. Yeah, we're going to use this panel that you're doing to actually issue a call to action. Thank you, Vice President. Vice President is referring to the Global Climate Action Summit in September, led by Jerry Brown, the governor of California. I'm a co-chair, and I have been requested and very willingly acceded to issue a call to action. First, to my own colleagues and my company, I commit that all Mahindra Group companies, all of us in our group, every company will commit to the Paris Agreement. What I'd also like to say is that all of our companies will commit to the Science Based Targets Initiative. If you don't know about that, look it up. But I think it's the one way in which every company in the world can find a roadmap, a very quantitative roadmap in how they're going to contribute to meeting the Paris goals and to getting climate change to be restricted to 2% global warming. There are metrics, there are methodologies. 300 companies have committed, 2 out of my own group companies, the highest emitters, have already committed. I would like to issue a call to action that let's all work on this so that by the time we reach the summit, 500 companies will have committed. I hope that meets your approval. Thank you.
Fantastic leadership. Thank you.
I'm sorry for setting you up with that.
No, that's fine. This is a good problem to have. Now, can I get anybody else feel free? Not just on the panel. Anyone of your audience wants to make commitments?
If I may build on that call to action, I just want to take a step back for a second on the business case that was made, and just ask a question first to the audience and everyone here. Raise your hands if you have children.
Grandchildren too.
Okay, so that's even better. So I saw the majority of hands go up here at Davos. And I just want to take a step back and frame the situation that we're in a bigger picture. Yeah. Throughout my life, I'm 27 right now. I'm turning 28 very soon. Essentially, the previous generation of decision makers have failed us, have failed our generation. And I'm not sugarcoating this. I think you have already failed us through the inaction from the previous generation. And the next 3 years, from 2018 to 2020, that's the time that you have to redeem yourselves. That is the message to the previous generation of decision makers. Because Mission 2020, which is an initiative by Christiana Figueres, who is the head of the UNFCCC, has those science-based targets that we need to really bend the curve in the next 3 years. And
3 years to redeem yourself. It's quite a powerful challenge. Okay, so, I'm going to come to the countries, but seeing as we started off on the businesses, let's just look at that. That's sort of a challenge. Is it something that you think, Jennifer, could actually spread? More and more companies coming out, groups coming out, insurance companies coming. There's a We Mean Business coalition is already there, and a large number of companies are coming up and joining it. Is this one of the ways that you see that challenge can actually be met?
Yes.
And the redemption that Risadat was talking about?
If the action comes quickly. That's the key. That's the key. And that it's at scale. Because I think what we're seeing is a lot of good action, a lot of good words, but it can't be incremental anymore. That's the thing. So this disruption, and I completely agree with you. I feel like there's this space that's opened up for economic development, for people that can be stepped into by companies and by governments, but by companies particularly, for your shareholders, but also for more importantly, from my perspective, for the planet. So it has to be big enough. And that's what we'll look at to see, okay, great to see the momentum. But, we just came from a meeting about deforestation. Last year, an area the size of New Zealand was deforested, right? We're not winning on deforestation. And so the Tropical Forest Alliance needs to step it up, and they need to go big as well. So I think it's possible. We welcome it. We want to see the big actions. And I think, I also just quickly, I want to just say on the impact side,